Okay. So we were supposed to add some depth to our scene in some way. I think I mentioned something about spikes or something like that. So let's take a look at that in our scene here. So I'm going to go to the asset store and let's see if we can find something to fall onto. So maybe I'm going to call this spikes. Otherwise, we're just going to make stuff. 2D platformer art. There's clouds and stuff for us too. We can put clouds on that one. Here's some textures and materials. We could probably make one of those things work. These are like little spike dudes. If I can find him in there, let's get. So there's a couple things we're going to try to accomplish here. We're going to have baby falls off platform, lands on thing that hurts. We're going to create a mediocre death animation for the player. But then we want to think about that transition between the player beginning to die. So think about what happens when Mario dies. I'm pretty sure he does kind of like he hops up in the air a little bit and does this like scared looking thing, right? And then he just falls off the screen. So we want to have some sort of abrupt change in position. Maybe we just add some force up or something like that, almost like we jumped. Play the animation, and then upon the animation ending, we want to have the player actually die. Now, after a player dies, what usually happens if you still have lives left? Player comes back somewhere. So we have to think about that problem. Because this is the player is the one that has all of our controls in it, and depending on the nature of our game, whether we're keeping track of hit points or life points or number of hearts or whatever it is, we have to consider where those things are going to live, because we have them live in the actual player object, and we go and kill off that player object, we might have a problem. So now we might want to be making a decision between possibly just hiding it versus killing it and that kind of stuff. But let's kind of go down that path some. What has occurred? Oh, because we have the kill script in there right now, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's the on collision enter. Destroy this game. So we'll get rid of that for right now. Where's my floors?
Looks like they're hiding behind your background.
Yeah.
I had to add a sorting layer to make the background go behind them on the other game.
But where's my background? Is it?
It's under your layer.
Oh, it's under my camera.
Yeah.
I thought the background layer was. Background layer should be behind the other ones. Wonder how the.
It should be the top one. Seems to go top down.
So top down is the back?
Yeah. Whichever one's the top is the
It's not going there.
So under the sprite render, under the sorting layer.
Oh. You have to tell that.
You have to tell that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. No, what I'm really wondering though is why did I not have to do that last time?
Yeah, that's the.
Because it was showing up last time. Because I'm guessing that's what was happening to you last time, right? And then you can even specifically give a game object the order within the layer that it's in case you want to have things within a certain layer layered on top of each other. I'm guessing that's the deal there. All right, let's see what our baby's doing right now. Okay, so we want to have our baby drop off there. Camera's already following them, but we need to have some spikes and stuff for the baby to run into. Let's go into my new assets. I'm going to just open up this demo scene that came with this. A lot of times you can kind of see the different things that are in there just by looking at the demo scene. So I'm going to save our current scene. So we got coins. Yeah, these are kind of, there's that guy. It's a spike down. So my presumption is there is a spike up, but I can always just rotate that.
There is a spike.
Oh, there's a spike up?
Yep.
Go back in here.
It's on your enemies.
Oh, probably could have made that. Picked one of the bigger ones then. Because I have everything else blown up quite a bit. Oh man, look at this. You just fall on some saws. Or maybe this dude. He can be like a bad guy, but he's like a spike face guy. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's perfect. Okay, so we have, and we'll actually create a couple of these, but let's actually just create one first, so that way we can create duplicates and put any scripts on it and stuff like that. So we're going to have, with this, we're going to do something called a prefab as well. So we're going to design this guy because, you know, we might want to have like little spiky potholes throughout our game, right? So we're going to design this once, throw any scripts we're going to want to have on them, things like that. And then we'll bring him down. You know, after we get him designed, we can pull him down here, and that'll store him as a prefab so that whenever we need him again, we just drag it back in, and it's that exact same setup. So we'll get it working once and then reuse it multiple times. Okay. So we want the baby to be able to run into this guy first. Excuse me. Now, we have a couple of options. We can have the baby become aware that he bumped into this, or we can have this guy become aware that he bumped into the baby. Now, in this case, we want to be playing an animation on the baby when this happens. So we're going to be making things happen to the baby. That doesn't mean that we can't do it from the maces, or whatever it's called, the spiky things perspective. But since we already have the animator and everything like that in the baby, it probably at least makes the initial sense to have the baby become aware that he's bumped into that. Now, if we go back to our script, we'll remember that the baby already knows how to collide with something called the floor and do something in response to that. So now we're just going to add a new type of thing for it to collide to. And we're going to have to go in and set the tag for this guy. So right now he's untagged. So we're going to add a tag, and maybe we tag this guy like death or something like that. So anything that we touch that's death is bad.
Like my Fallout.
You tagged him Fallout?
Yeah, like he's falling out of the game.
Well, what if he bumps in? I mean, wouldn't we want the same thing to happen? So if we think about Mario, doesn't the same thing happen when Mario falls off a ledge as if Mario runs into one of those turtle guys? So anything that's an enemy, anything that's bad, Mario has that same reaction, as opposed to having 50 different tags for all the things that might hurt us. So we'll tag this guy enemy. We'll do that. We'll add a tag. There's our enemy tag. And then we'll select it. Okay. And we need to make sure that our mace guy down here has a box collider 2D. And we're going to set that, actually it can just be a normal box collider. Actually, we want it to be a trigger because we want to do the callback on it. But it's actually the baby. So the box collider on the floor is not a trigger. The box collider on the baby is not a trigger. Oh, we're not doing it with triggers. We're doing the other, on collision enter. So this was what we looked at last time for an alternative way of bumping into something instead of treating it. We wanted to treat it like physics, right, for that floor, but at the same time, we want to be able to programmatically do something in response, where a trigger is really a one or the other thing. Now, in this case here, we really could have this guy be a trigger, right? An enemy could be a trigger, but we might as well have them act physically as well, so it's not going to hurt anything. We just keep the code together. So now we're going to say else if collision.gameObject.tag is equal to what I call enemy. Okay, so collision.gameObject.tag equal to enemy. And something I'll reference here that we referenced in 250 yesterday is notice I'm using the double equal sign for comparing these strings. C# allows that. So we spent a bunch of time yesterday talking about Java and how it gives string literals and gives them a different value. C# will allow this to happen. So it's a little bit different workings how you compare strings. Okay, so if the tag is equal to enemy, then we're going to do some stuff. And what are we going to do? Well, we want to play some sort of death animation. For right now, let's just make them jump a little bit. And, it's like something hurt, right? So we're going to go ahead, and I think we already have our rigid body, right? So we're going to say this.rb.add force. And we got to give it the direction. So we're going to say vector2.up. And then we need to give it a power. Let's try 500. There's a float, right? Oh, we just multiply it. Vector2 times 500. F. All right, so it'll give us a force in the upwards direction. So let's see how that looks. Compilers. Should have been able to multiply there. I have it saved, don't I? Oh, I didn't have it saved. I missed. Let's. I didn't want to have to create my prefabs yet. But if I don't hit it this time, I'll. All right. So I couldn't tell.
The block supplier still says it's triggered.
Oh, thank you. All right, well, he definitely collided with it that time, but I'm going to put a whole bunch of these down here. All right, so now baby's bouncing off of this thing. Well, so what we really want to have happen is we want to have maybe this thing where, ooh, it hurt, bounce back up in the air, but then probably have some animation play. And then at the end of the animation, maybe kill off the baby instead of having him jump up and down the spikes, which maybe that's what zombie babies might do. But in general, it's probably not the effect we're going for. But we have we do have something happening now. Why don't we just have these spike things be our new floor? Okay. So now let's look at an animation for this guy. And we're going to have to use our character. So yeah, maybe we do this animation where he's like turning away from us. I'm kind of walking away. That's not a great death, but it might be the best we can pull off in short order. So I'll drag that into the scene. We're going to call this guy BabyDeath. Put that into our animations folder. I'm going to go ahead and delete that from the scene. And we'll go ahead and delete that new controller they gave us. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to open up the baby animation controller. And I'm going to drag the BabyDeath animation into there. All right. Now, we need to, I want to mess around with something here. Because for death, I think this should work. We might say, depending on what decision we make on the next step, that death is a permanent thing, right? And so when the baby dies, we don't need to worry about transitioning back to another state or something like that. So really, rather than having all these back and forth transitions like we have in all these other states, can't we just go from, they give us this thing called any state. So from any state, we can possibly move into the death animation with another firing of a trigger. Make sense? So let's go ahead and give us our parameter. We'll do another trigger. And you could do this with a Boolean too, just triggers are, since we're just firing them, the trigger is an easier one to use. I just double clicked on the controller. This guy down here. That's it. So we'll call this should die. So now from any state, we'll make a transition to BabyDeath. And that transition will happen under the condition of should die. Okay, so it doesn't matter what we're currently doing. If we hit something that is something we're not supposed to hit, we will play the die animation. Okay. And this BabyDeath, we actually have to click on it here. We're going to go ahead and turn off loop time. So this is not inside the controller. This is in the animation itself. It's possible we might need to slow it down a bunch because we only have a couple of frames. But really, we don't want the baby to imagine a normal death thing where maybe the baby falls over. You probably don't want it to fall over and over again unless you're trying to do the whole, demonic possession thing, smacking you under the ground, which is obviously level 2. But it's for this one, we really want the baby to die once and then us make the necessary adjustments to the game. Okay, so for that baby death animation itself, I clicked on the animation, went to the inspector for the animation, I turned off loop time. So I won't just keep playing it over and over again. And then inside the controller, I can probably slow it down in here, and I'm pretty certain we're gonna need to slow it down. So why don't we actually just make it we'll make it 0.1 right now. 1/10 of the speed it would be otherwise. And the hope is then we can see it. So now I'm actually inside of the controller, clicking on the baby death animation inside the inspector, and that allows me to have a speed for that animation to play. Okay, so now we have the ability to set a trigger for should die under some circumstances. So let's start with that. So I'll go back into our code. All right, so now I'm adding the force 500 up. Now I also, this is inside of the baby movement script. I already have access to my animator. So I'll say this.anim.set trigger should die. So that'll tell the controller to go ahead and, well, it'll tell the controller to set the should die trigger, and the should die trigger should fire from any state because we have this transition that operates on should die and should take us to the baby death. Let's go ahead and test this. Oh. He's not should dying.
Mine did.
Yours should died. Baby death should die. Should. Oh, that's becoming kind of habitual, isn't it? Is there an autosave feature in this? Actually, you know what? I think I did. The issue is since I flip back and forth between Macs and PCs, I think sometimes I forget to hit Control S to save, and I'm hitting. I'm probably hitting. Actually, Alt S probably opens something. No, I'm hitting Alt S at least half the time.
Yeah, I get that. I do that. I have a Windows. I mess up.
Yeah, and then once I get into like the mood for it, then I can start saving on a PC, but I forget that I can't save on a Mac. The other thing is this keyboard's like a little bit larger than the Mac, so I'm off a half a key sometimes. Mm-hmm. It makes it enjoyable. All right, so now this guy's actually saved. Okay, so it actually didn't seem like a horrible speed. I'm actually going to slow it down more than that, just to give me the effect I want. Oh man, that's still pretty fast. Then I'm probably not going to do this based on frames then. So I'll keep it at the, actually, is it even going to be, can you even tell the difference between 0.1 and 1? Or is this animation just so fast it doesn't matter? Yeah, looks the same. All right, so that's fine. So I originally was going to say at the end of this animation, go ahead and kill him. But now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it an amount of time. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to do something in the future. Okay. So the baby's going to hop. And I'm going to go ahead and inside of the baby movement, I'm going to create a private function called kill. And this one is going to say this dot, yeah, I'm actually going to destroy this dot game object. All right, so that's how we will kill off the baby. Now, just real quick here, I'm going to go ahead and I'll call our kill function normally, like this. So I wrote the function and then I just call it from down here. So I'll add the force up, I'll set my animation trigger, and then I'll tell the baby to kill himself. Now, we already saw this problem last time that if we do this, then we lose our camera, right? Because the camera is actually a parent of the, the baby is a parent of the camera. But we should see this immediately happen, and then we want to see it with a timer, and then we'll figure out how do we handle the camera thing differently. All right, so we'll go ahead and fall back here. All right, so notice the animation hasn't even started playing yet. So even though all these things were done in order, they're all thrown into a thread renderer that just says, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to try to do them all as close to at the same time as possible based on what things it needs. Is this GPU-based stuff? I have a whole bunch of cores I possibly can work with. All right, so we definitely didn't see the baby die first. And that means show us his butt. That's our death animation. I'm just making sure you understood that, Tim. That's what death means. All right, so we want something to happen at a delay, some sort of delay. And the same function we're about to look at works whether we want to do something once in the future or every so often in the future. If we want something to repeat every 5 seconds, for example, we can use this function as well. So instead of just killing it, there's a function called invoke. So there's two of them. There's invoke and then there's invoke repeating. Invoke repeating allows us to have something happen multiple times at a repeat rate. So I'm going to just use invoke. So invoke is going to take the name of the method as a string as well as the amount of time as a float until it should happen. So I'm going to invoke. Name of my method is kill. And the amount of time, let's have it happen in, well, let's try it 1.0 F. Save. All right, so it's seconds as a float. So this should give us that 1 second delay before he actually dies off. And if that doesn't give us enough time to see it, then we'll change it to 2 or 3 seconds. Actually, it was almost too much time. It was too much time. Baby bounced twice. I'm going to just make a slight little modification here. I'm going to change the force to 1,000. Throw them up in the air a little bit more. Okay. Probably not as violent as we want it to necessarily be, but we could still, we can mess around with it and tweak it or whatever to get it looking perfect. All right, so we're going to say our baby is successfully dying now. Well, we do have an issue though. Our issue right now is that our, when we actually kill off the baby, we're losing, really we're losing multiple things that we don't want to lose. We're losing the camera. Definitely that's an important part of this. We're losing our background. So really keeping this baby as part of the game is pretty important. We might not want to kill off our main player. Does that make sense? But we want the end user to still believe that the player's been killed off. So one thing we can do is we have this thing called a sprite renderer. We can turn off the sprite renderer. So if I click on, actually we don't have a camera anymore, so we can't see that. Let me just run this real quick again. So I'm on the baby. If I turn off the sprite renderer for the baby, you see what happens on the screen? This is default, it's on. Now all I did is I disabled the component that is the sprite renderer for the baby. And now you can't see him. Make sense? All right, so, and when the baby's not being rendered, it's also not responding to stuff. So it's kind of like disabling the baby. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, and when the baby's supposed to die, we're just going to make him not rendered. Let's see what effect that gives us. So the component we're looking for is the sprite renderer of the baby. So inside of kill, rather than actually destroying the game object, we're going to say this dot get component sprite renderer. So that'll get us the sprite renderer associated with the zombie baby. And then we're going to say dot enabled is equal to false. All right, give this one a shot. Now we can't see him. He's still bouncing. Now, oh, wait a minute. I can still move him. Full-blown death mode. It's actually interesting that I can still... Okay, well then, that's one way you can make him disappear, but since he's got a controller associated with him, I'm going to try something a little bit different here. This becomes extra problematic. Because we can control him still. So if we think 2 steps ahead, one thing we have to do anyways is, like Tim said, the baby's going to respawn, right? So we're going to have to figure out where it's going to respawn. So, you know, we maybe have some mechanism for us right now, we'll just pick a point. Okay, we'll pick a place where the baby's going to respawn. But as you're playing a game, you probably don't want to respawn at like the you know, very beginning of the level. There might be a couple of respawn points along the map, and whichever one you're closest to or something like that, that's where you would actually respawn. You know, that's more of just a game design choice. But we're going to have a place that the baby will respawn. And so when we do that, what we want to do is we want to actually make the baby's position go back there after the death. Does that make sense? But in the meantime, we need the baby to go someplace else and to not be, we shouldn't be able to move, you know, like drive the baby around and stuff like that. So we're going to have to, a couple of things we could do. The reason we put our camera as the child of the baby is so the camera auto follows the baby. We could disconnect them, write a script for the camera, and have that script's update follow the baby. So we could programmatically have the camera follow the baby if we wanted to. But even if we do that and we kill off the player, kill off the baby, then the camera will lose track of that the baby it's supposed to follow. So we'll have to reset that anyways when we respawn the baby. So what I think is going to make the most sense is, rather than making the baby disappear, is putting the baby way off the screen somewhere. But we also need to be able to disable the baby's movement. Okay, so I think we already have do we already have a thing for movement? Yeah, this is where we're doing our force for right and left movement, as well as jumping and stuff. So I think we should probably do something like private bool is alive. Start this off at true. And then this update stuff only happens if this dot is alive. So we'll take all the code that we currently have inside of update. And these are things that we only want to occur while the baby is living, or undead, as it were. So if we were being true to our game, we would say, while baby is dead, then it can do this stuff. So does that mean a zombie becomes alive when you kill it? That would make all those zombie movies break. Like, how do you become more dead than dead? They're technically undead. All right, that's your homework, Tim.
You want to know?
You got to figure that out. What happens to a zombie when we kill it? It's already dead. He's not.
Ceases to exist.
Well, no, he's still there. We hope he doesn't do the ghost thing and can still move like we like we have on the screen right now. All right, so as long as our dude is alive, we'll respond to all these actions. So let's just make sure that this is going to give us the effect we want. So inside of kill, I'm going to say this dot is alive is equal to false. So that programmatically kills us, right? We've locked down all of our inputs. And then just to make sure we can't move, I'm just going to go ahead and do the get component. Sprite. What kind of object was it? Sprite renderer. So we'll get the sprite renderer dot enabled is equal to false. All right, so this should lock the player down so it can't move anymore from us. But I think we're going to still see the player bouncing. See the camera going up and down a little bit. Because that's an act that we didn't take part in. That's just physics. It's actually pretty interesting that it appears that the renderer itself plays into auto mass. See how much higher the baby's jumping right now when you can't see it? It's the invisible power jump. Okay. Well, so now we have it so that we can't move around, and we have it that we can't see the baby, but we'd really like to not be bouncing continuously. Right? All right. So we really just don't want to bounce a second time. So when do we bounce? We bounce if we collided with an enemy and we're currently alive. Okay. Now this might not be our perfect, kind of death scene. I think in Mario, doesn't Mario kind of like fall completely off the screen so you don't see him? We could do that type of thing, but then we have the issue that the camera's going to go with them. So let's say we wanted to do that type of thing. I want to see the baby jump up once and then fall down. How would we accomplish that? What do they do in the movies? I mean, we know that pick your favorite actor or actress, when they die in a movie, they didn't really die. They have a stunt double, right? So couldn't we take in gaming, a lot of the term if you're watching videos and stuff like that is usually something called a rag doll. So we're going to take something that looks like our player, visually is our player, but doesn't have any of the controls or the camera or any of that stuff attached to it. And we're just going to put him where the player is. Let's him fall to his death. Does that make sense? So what we really want then is let's get that second piece then working. So as it stands right now, what we'd like to have happen is baby hits this. Okay. When the baby hits that, at that point, we spawn the ragdoll, add a force to the ragdoll, have the ragdoll fall back down, maybe just fall off the screen. But that ragdoll doesn't have a camera associated with it, doesn't have any of these other things associated with it. Then we'll respawn the baby just at another part of the screen. So we're shutting down the baby, we're disabling the baby right now, as we have already done. We're saying it's not alive, you can't move, all that stuff. He's only going to bounce once. But really, we don't even want him to bounce, because if he's bouncing, then we have that. We're going to have that camera motion, right? What we really want to do is we don't want to have the camera motion. We want to just have that ragdoll shoot up in the air and then fall back through. So we're going to need to program a version of this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take our go into so baby scale is 10. Okay. So I'm going to come out here. This is the end of our baby death animation. So we're going to go ahead and drag this guy in here. We're going to call this dead baby ragdoll. And then we're going to scale it up. Oh, wrong 10. Okay. Looks like a pretty good stand-in for our baby. Okay. Now, one thing we can do is we can actually just keep this guy off the screen. You know, we could instantiate it each time, but we might as well use the same ragdoll over and over again rather than taking up more memory and stuff like that. So as long as we're not currently in the scene, this guy can remain there. You know, so the camera is this square or rectangle, whatever. So that's what we can currently see. This baby is all the way over here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start this. All right, so we can find our ragdoll if we do that, right? So really, we wanted to maybe move with the baby, or maybe it just has its renderer turned off. So if we turn the sprite render off on that, it's turned off. Now, one problem we run into with that, though, from a programmer's perspective, is now after about 5 minutes, we're going to forget that baby was ever there. So you have this invisible game object in the scene. So what I would recommend is you leave that guy on. We're going to go into our baby script. I'm going to go up top. We're going to create another public variable to give ourselves access to that ragdoll. So we're going to say public game object dead baby ragdoll. All right, so we're going to be able to programmatically get access to this dude. Now I'm going to go hook it up real quick. So if I click on my player, we see our script. He's expecting a dead baby ragdoll. So I'll go ahead and drag our dead baby ragdoll over there. All right, so now our baby movement script knows about the dead baby ragdoll. And therefore, when the baby movement script starts, we can tell them to go ahead and turn off the renderer for that ragdoll. So this dot dead baby ragdoll dot get component sprite renderer dot enabled is equal to false. Oh, I just started adding that to all sorts of things, didn't I? I zigged when I should have zagged. All right. So now let's make sure we can't see it. All right, yeah, can't see it anymore. Okay, so now when we are meant to die, the very first thing we want to do is we want to bring that ragdoll to our position in world space. So we're going to set its transform to the same thing as our transform. All right, so let's kind of do that next step. So right down here, this is the stuff that we currently have for dying. I'm going to just write some things before this. And then after, I'm going to ask you, well, let's ask the question first. When you play Mario, and I know all of us, we just played it this morning, we woke up, so maybe played it in a few years. But when Mario dies, is there actually an animation of him like moving from his whatever position he's currently in to the, you know, the whole, I don't know, whatever his hands are doing, the I'm shocked thing? There's no animation with that. He just becomes that. There is the animation where he kind of pops up in the air and drops down, but that's just me throwing the ragdoll up in the air and falling off the screen. we're not relying on that transition to that animation. Does that make sense? He just becomes dead and then pops off the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the ragdoll to the same place as we are. First thing. So we're going to say this dot dead baby ragdoll dot transform dot position is equal to this dot transform dot position. So that'll move it to the exact same place as we currently reside. Then I'm going to go ahead and disable our baby and disable our baby's sprite render. And then I'm going to enable the dead baby sprite renderer. All right, so now this dead baby is what we actually want to add that force to. And then just let it naturally fall down off the screen. Now, we can only add forces to rigid bodies. So we're going to have to go back out to our dead baby, this ragdoll, and we'll just add a rigid body 2D. To that guy. Now, this baby does not have a box collider, so we don't need to worry about him bumping back into the spikes. We're just going to add some force to the rigid body of that dead baby. So we're going to say this dot dead baby ragdoll dot get component rigid body 2D. So that's the rigid body 2D component of the dead baby. Dot add force. We're going to add some force. In what direction and power? Vector2 dot up times, we'll do the 1000F. So then we won't add force to our baby's rigid body anymore. We won't play the should die animation, and we won't have to call that invoke method yet. We're probably going to want to invoke a respawn method in a moment, but for right now, we should be faking out the end user by moving the invisible dead baby ragdoll to our position, turning our alive off, making ourselves invisible, making the dead baby visible, throwing the ragdoll up in the air a little bit, and then letting it fall forever. Make sense? They probably need a little bit more force than the 1000. Maybe that actually has something to do with auto mass on the dead baby. Pretty much did what we wanted him to do, except he didn't really fly up in the air very far. Yeah, let's give him an extra little boost. Oh, it's because originally his invisible, so his auto mass would probably be nothing. Let's give it 5,000. Ooh, Superman power jump. 5,000 was too much. 2,000. mean, 1,000 seemed to do nothing. 5,000 seemed to do everything. All right, not horrible. Maybe the baby had a little bit too much hang time, but I think we can, it gave us the effect we were looking for, right? Or something in close proximity to it. And then you play a little sound with that. Or probably some dead baby screaming, a live baby screaming. Yeah.
Can you still move that to
And the reason we can't move is because we're still using that logic for whether or not we're alive. But we never jumped. So we didn't do anything with our actual player. So what's actually happening right now is our player is sitting right there invisible and paralyzed. Make sense? So now when we go to respawn, we want to move our player back to our respawn point. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a respawn point in our scene. Now you could just randomly, I guess, pick a place and try to move the baby back onto the board. But typically, the easiest way to do this in game design is to throw something else in the place that you want it to be, make it invisible so that you can get it back to the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to probably want to look. I'm just going to steal another one of these characters. We'll use these as baby respawns. So call that baby respawn. Scale it up 10 to 10. And I'm going to go ahead and just for our scene here, I'm going to place it just above the ground where the, where we'd want. Actually, we can place it kind of at the very beginning point. No, actually, it doesn't really matter. Here, this is going to be easier for us. We're going to say for our simple game, we always respawn at the exact same place we started. So what we're going to do is we're going to let the baby's movement script know about this baby respawn. And what we'll do is we'll right away move the baby respawn to our player's start point. So we know exactly where our player is starting. That way we now have, and we'll turn off the renderer then. So we'll move him there, turn off the renderer. We'll never see him. We can even turn off the renderer first, then move him. He can still move. So we will never actually physically see him on the screen. He's just a placeholder for us. And then what will happen is after our player has died, maybe after 3 seconds or 2 seconds, however long we decide we want it to take, we'll go ahead and we will respawn. Well, we will move our player to the place of respawn, wherever we've positioned where our player first started. And then we'll go ahead and we will turn off, we'll turn ourselves back alive so that we can start moving and stuff again. And then gravity should take effect. And actually, gravity will take effect immediately. Even though we can't move, we were sitting on something before. So gravity would start taking effect immediately, and we basically fall back into the game like we did originally. All right, so let's let our movement script know about our baby respawn. I'm going to create another public game object. Call this respawn point. I'm going to call it respawn point ragdoll, just to kind of drive that idea into our head. So if you're ever looking at documentation and they're referencing something like that, it's a stand-in. And I think they do that in movies all the time too. So like I think I saw the making of Guardians of the Galaxy 2. So they had a rag doll for Baby Groot that was like in every scene. So when they were supposed to be talking to, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble here, but there isn't one of those real guys running around. That wasn't a little dude in a suit. What? What?
For sure.
Yeah, but I saw some documentary. The actors, it was like difficult for them because they were talking to a doll, which I can relate to. But see, there's going to be a point where I'm going to forget to introduce Mr. Gonzalez to my classes early in the semester, and then like, what do you mean you could relate to it? If you watch, I don't know, did we put up the presentation videos from the hackathon? Mr. Gonzalez actually went on stage for both presentations.
Did we got a video of that?
Yeah, I took a video of it.
Of
both of them. There. Yeah, so I mean, I didn't go up on stage for either of them because I didn't do any of the work. But Mr. Gonzalez, he was a member of both teams. He kind of hedged his bet in case there was only one winner. It's a thing.
He wasn't introduced to the second group though. I realized that after.
That's true. He just went up there. Yeah, he just
had him up there.
He should have gone up with some of the other groups that he had like nothing to do with.
Yeah.
Just throw him up there during it.
I feel like we really weirded out some of those people having that.
I think maybe. That's okay.
Oh well, their fault.
Yeah. Well, probably not. It's probably your fault, but. Okay, so. Although that wasn't as the emergency email or text I sent my mom the first morning where we couldn't find Mr. Gonzalez when we left the house.
Oh, yeah.
So I messaged so we went over to the hackathon. I messaged my mom. So this is a grown man texting his mom, his somewhat elderly mother. And I know she can't really walk stairs very easily. So I said, can you send Dad downstairs and get eyes on Mr. Gonzalez? We can't find him anywhere. I have the text message saved and everything. And it's one of the more pathetic things this month. All right, so we're going to have our respawn point ragdoll. Let's go connect that dude up. So we're going to click on our player, and we see our baby movement is now expecting a respawn point ragdoll. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that ragdoll over there. Okay. Then we will come back into our code. Right off the bat, we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn off the renderer for that ragdoll. Really, we are using a little computation cycles, but we're only doing it once when the game first starts. To turn off these renderers, but I think my feeling is that plays better for our own psychology of not having all these invisible sprites on the screen. We will remember more easily when we say, well, what are these babies over here for? Like, oh, those are the ragdolls. When we click on one of them, we see the name over here. It's like, oh, that's the ragdoll. So we'll go ahead and turn it off in here. So we'll say this dot respawn point ragdoll get component. And I'm also not storing these renderers just to keep our number of just random variables relatively low at the top here. If we need to go ahead and get the component once or twice when we turn it off or on, it's not the end of the world. Probably better than having the, 2 or 3 extra variables just slopping up the top of the program. You could decide if you rather have a variable for it, it's fine. Okay, respawn point ragdoll, get component, sprite renderer, dot enabled, is equal to false, so that'll hide it. Get component. Oh, I need to open close. All right, but now we do want to move the transform of that ragdoll to the same place as our player currently lives, which is right before he drops into the scene. Well, drops onto the ground. So we'll say this dot respawn point ragdoll dot transform dot position is equal to this dot transform dot position. He's already invisible, but we've just moved his invisible self to a new location. Now, when you type this in, you'll see that there's a position and then there's something called a local position. We haven't really had to mess with local position yet, but just we do have an opportunity to quickly explain the difference because we are already using the difference. Back out here in Unity, we already have a situation where a player has a child that is the camera, and then the camera has a child that is our background. The local position of the camera, for example, is its position relative to its parent. Its position is its global position in the entire scene. Those are what those two things mean. So position is an object's global position in the scene. Local position is the position relative to its parent, which for many objects might be the scene itself. But when we have nested objects like we've created here, the local position will be the position relative to its direct parent. Does that make sense? So sometimes that might be the thing that we want to move, or we don't want to move it somewhere else in the world. We want to move it positionally in a different place relative to the person that's holding it. Okay. So now we have our position of our ragdoll is turned off. We have the position of the ragdoll reset to, well, it's visually turned off. We have the position set to where the player starts. So now what we want to do is what we say after 3 seconds, respawn the player in its original location. I'm just going to steal that comment here. And I'm going to, now we do the shared project from Dropbox is working, right? We're able to open that, and because I have the project, I have a link to the Dropbox folder on Slack, don't I? Has anybody tried it?
I may have seen it.
Okay. So here, let me create the assignment first. And then I'll go ahead and I'll put this code up on Dropbox just in case. But I'm also going to create, I thought I already done it. I'm also going to create a link to our Dropbox folder where I'm saving all this stuff. So that if you need to open up the whole project and kind of say, okay, my project is broken, what did he do? Then you can do that. All right, but I'll make sure the code is up here for now. But for next class, for Tuesday, bring your game up to speed with this, but then also add the respawn thing so something happens in 3 seconds, and he should respawn to where he started. That makes sense? Questions, comments, concerns, bribes? All right, I'll see everybody on Tuesday. I'll be at the front row of chapel if anybody's interested. All right.